everybody. Trying to get everything turned on here. We'll see if anything shows up with comments here tonight. I'm kind of looking away from the camera because I have the camera turned on a different table tonight. So you'll see the side of my face tonight. So make sure you say something when you come in to make sure you can hear me okay. I have a new camera tonight, so we're going to see how it goes. So hopefully people can hear me. So make sure you comment that you can hear me. I haven't used this camera yet I've used it for a video, but not for a live yet. So hi everybody. Sorry, I'm kind of looking away from the camera. The computer's to the side, and I've got the stuff turned to my table in front of me here. So hi Jan. So is everybody hearing me okay? The comments are coming through tonight. That's good. Can you hear me good? All right, good. Good. Yeah, because I thought I had an issue with the camera on, I think it was Friday. I was working on class stuff, and it actually wasn't the camera. So I'd been thinking about getting another camera anyway, a new camera, and just so I had two. It makes me feel better to have a spare. And anyway, I went up and bought a new camera, and then I discovered later it was actually a Windows update that was causing it, because this camera did it too. So this new camera, but I think I've got the Windows update turned off at least for a while so that it'll be okay. So hopefully they'll get that fixed before too long, because it messed up all the cameras. That's really bad when you do a lot of classes online. So how's everybody tonight? I had a really nice vacation. I've been working on classes all week, and I had a really good time. I posted all the stuff up for the June class, the June America Land That I Love. That's a Kimberbell bench pillow. And I got that up on the group. If you need the CD, it's up on our website, so I put the link to the website. That will be the June class. That'll be June, the last 3 weeks in June. And I also did a video that I'll post the 1st of June. That's pre-recorded to kind of show you the piecing on the top. Most people will not have a problem, but it is a little different, so I thought I'd just do a little video on it. So how is everybody tonight? Are you ready for that's not a vacation? Well, you know what? It was, because I didn't have to go to the store and, all day. So I enjoyed a staycation. I got a lot of stuff done. I cleaned my back bedroom. I got all the samples ready. I'm going to take all the samples down at the store and put all new samples up. I'm going to, so I got my back bedroom all cleaned up. I got all the doll molds. The doll molds are all gone except for the ones going to Connie. So I got the doll molds all cleaned up, and I had a good week, so haven't got lots of things done. So the new camera looks good. The picture I think is better with the new camera. This is like the step above the one I had, and but I still have the other one. It does work fine, but I'm gonna leave. Then I have a spare. I just feel better having a spare. So good. So the comments are coming through, and that's great. So everybody's hearing me, and the comments are coming through, so we're good. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to work on trimming these, laying out and trimming, and then assembling the center of the Hunter Star. Now the Hunter Star quilt is, of course, like we saw last week, and I'm going to turn this camera around now, so just a second here. We're going to start at this table, and then I'll move the camera over to the sewing machine. So this quilt is put together a little differently than Starting Over was. Starting Over had the little sashings in here, and this one is sewn together directly, and then you sash the back. So you can see when I sewed it together back here how there's a raw seam here. And then what I'm going to show you tonight, then after you sew these together, how you put the sashing piece on that covers up that raw seam, and then it makes it look like it's just been sewn together, but it's already got the batting in it. So the trick with this quilt, what I found was easier for me anyway, is when I went to trim these blocks, it was easier to trim them, lay them out and like number them, and then trim them according to my diagram. And I'll show you this diagram over here. But I found that it was easier than trying to trim them as I was going, unless I already had them numbered. So I kind of, that some of the blocks need to be trimmed with all through all layers, like the ones along this outside edge over here. Let me turn the camera just a little bit. The ones over here are trimmed through all the layers, including the batting. So see, the batting is in there, okay? And then part of the blocks need to be trimmed, and you need to trim out the batting, like the ones that are in the center here need to be trimmed. You need to trim the batting out because you're going to sew these together. And so it depends on where you're putting it, how you're going to trim it. So there's a picture on page 31 of the book. And if you look here, this is how I did this then, is I laid out my quilt. And to make the stars, see, you have to turn the block. So like here, the B is here, and then here the B is here. So you have to turn them like this. So just look at the picture and lay it out. And then on this one, the B goes this direction, and then it comes down this way. So it's back and forth. And each row it's going to go back and forth. Like this row, the B is pointing upwards to the right, and this one it's pointing upwards to the left. And then the next row it'll be pointing upwards to the right, and then next upwards to the left. So that is all shown in this picture. And then there's a pink stripe around the outside edge. And what that means is that is where the blocks need to be trimmed through all three layers, including the batting, because we need the batting to attach the borders on the inside of the body here. And then next week when we trim the borders, we have to trim the borders differently on some of them because we have to attach the corner blocks to those. So that's in a different diagram. But where this pink stripe is all the way around, that's where you're going to be trimming your blocks through all three layers. So when I trim these, that's usually how I do it first. So I get it laid out and I get them numbered. So like I had mine numbered on the back with one of those friction pens. I don't know if I've got one of them here, so you can probably see the number 1 on the back, okay? So once I iron them, some of the numbers come off. You just have to kind of be careful. But once I get them sewn together, I know where they're going. So I had them all numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and then my next row was 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So I knew where I was going to put the blocks. And then what I did is I made sure that I knew how I was going to trim them. So like this block up here, let's raise the camera up here. This block up here, the first block, is this block right here on my diagram. So I have to have it cut through all three layers on 2 sides because it's a corner. So I like to do that first. So like this one, I cut through all 3 layers on this side and then on this side. And then I did the other 2 sides because they were cut with the batting taken out. So I'm going to cut a couple of blocks so that you understand. But then like when you move to this block only has one side that's against that red line, that pink line on the diagram, and so does this one. So these 2 are cut the same way. Then I'm back over here to this other corner. My quilt just has 4 blocks by 4 blocks. So this one is a corner block. So this one has to be trimmed through all 3 layers on 2 sides. Okay? Then as I move down, it's going to change. This one, I just needed it to be cut through all 3 layers on this left side, and the rest of it is I'm going to trim the batting out. Okay? So as I trim a couple of these blocks, you'll understand what this means. Like this one, see, this one's a block that's all an inside. So this one this one's going to be trim. We're going to trim the batting out on all 3 sides of this one, or all 4 sides of this one, and this one too. Okay, so that way, so I like to lay it out and so that I understand where they go and I number them. If you don't want to put a mark on the back, you can always just put a piece of paper, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and then layer them in rows so that you know where they go. And then I've even taken that number and placed it here on my diagram so I know which one I'm cutting. Okay, so to trim these blocks, and I've done some pre-sewing tonight so that you didn't have to watch me sew this entire thing together. It took me a while this afternoon to do this. So I've got, these are all trimmed and sewn together. This is the last row. So let's push this up. And this is my last row. Okay? So the last row, I only have 4 rows in my quilt. So the last row is like, it's going to be another corner block, see? So this one is number 13. This is my block. So here I have trimmed through all 3 layers on this side and this side because it's along the outside edge. Okay, and then I took the batting out on this side. All right, so when I get to the next 2, you'll understand. This one here just has one side that is going to go along the border, the bottom. Okay, and then I've trimmed out the batting on 3 sides on this one. Okay, so the next block, make sure I got number 15. Okay, here's number 15. And I might have to stand up and trim. I'm not sure if I can trim sitting down or not. All right, so I want to look at this block, and I know this is the way it has to go. So here's, make sure we get these laid in here. So we know, we want to make sure we get it right side up, correct? So this one, the B is going to the left, and this one then needs to go to the left because then I can see my star forms down here. You can see my star forming. Okay, like that. And then, so we need to make sure this one is oriented correctly. So the first thing I like to do, this one is on the bottom of my quilt. So this side is the bottom on this particular block. And I want to trim through all the layers along this one side. And I always do that first because it helps me keep organized of what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to take this block. This is the way it goes, but I know this is the side down here that needs to be trimmed through all the layers. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to have to stand up to do this. So, okay. I'm going to lay my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler just slightly inside that basting line that goes all the way around my block. And it's just this one side we're trimming off, okay? And I am trimming through the backing, the batting, and the top. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. Okay, so here is the bottom of that block. That's the only one that needed to be trimmed that way because this will be where the border is going to be attached because we need the batting in there. Now, to do the other sides, this one is going to have 3 sides that we're going to be trimming down, but we need to get the batting and the backing out of that because we just need the top so we can sew it together. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. So when I learned to do these, I had done a bunch of the Hoop Sisters quilts. And they have a cool tool on their website at hoopsisters.com, and it's called the George Trimmer 2.0. And what's cool about this trimmer is it's a nice ruler. It's a 6 by 12 ruler, but it's got this little ridge on it. Okay? And what's nice about this, when you trim the rest of these, I'm going to do this both ways so you can see. What you do is you take this trimmer, and you can still buy these on their website. Oops, I got something stuck here. I'm going to slip that little lip under the top of the block. So this, I just got the top here. The batting and the backing are underneath, but they're not in there. And I'm going to flip this down, and then see how I can just see the batting and the backing and the stabilizer right there? Then I can trim it out, and I want to trim that out right up to the stitches. What's nice about that little lip is that it helps you to trim that away. So you can see I've trimmed away the backing, the batting, and the stabilizer. Okay, and there's still just a little bit there, but not very much. And what's nice about that tool is that they built this lip on here so that you can't cut into your fabric on the top. And then after I have done that, I am going to take my ruler. I'm going to lay it just slightly inside that basting line on just the top part, and I'm going to trim that off. So I have 1/4 of an inch seam. So this is what I'm sewing together when I go to put these blocks together, is just this part, and then I've cut out the backing and the batting and the stabilizer out of the back, okay? So that's how I do a lot of the sides, but remember, we still have some of these that we have to cut through all of the layers because we need that to attach the borders in this case, okay? So I'm going to do another one of these. So let me show you another one with the George trimmer, okay? With that little lip on it. If you plan on doing a couple, 3 of these, it would be worth the extra money to buy the trimmer. I have done a lot of these quilts, and I like this trimmer very much. But I'll show you the way to do it without the trimmer, because it isn't hard to do it without it. You can do it without it. Okay, so I'm going to slide this that little ledge in up to the stitching, and then I'm going to trim. And I forgot to grab my other rotary cutter. This rotary cutter works much better with a 60mm rotary cutter. Okay, so see how I have cut out the backing and the batting and the stabilizer. And then that leaves this little flip of fabric here. And I'm going to trim that down to 1/4 of an inch. So it does take a little while to trim this. Once you know where your blocks go and everything, it makes it easier. And then I just go but one block at a time and trim my blocks. Okay, so we got 3 sides, or 3 of the sides done. Now the 4th side, let me show you how I do this with a regular ruler, because it's very easy. It's easy to do it with a regular ruler. And that's how I put it in my instructions, because they have a patent, of course, on this George trimmer. But you can sure get it if you want to. So what you do if you are using a regular ruler is I just take my top, like this, on this side. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to finger press it down, okay, so that it's creased well. Then I'm going to take my regular ruler and I'm going to lay it with the top underneath, folded, and I'm going to make sure that that edge of my ruler is just barely past the fold, because you don't want to cut into your fold. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to trim the backing, the batting, and the stabilizer away. So see, I got the same result. But it is a little easier. You have to be a little careful that you don't cut into your fold, okay? Now I'm going to lay this down again with my regular ruler. I'm going to put my 1/4 inch seam marking just barely inside that stitching line. Got a little second here. I got to move this over. I got a little bit of a spot that didn't cut for me. There we go. Like that. So this block is now trimmed, and this is going to be block number, I think I had this one as block number, what is it, 15. So this block goes here. This block goes here. Okay, so there's 3 of our 4 row blocks for the bottom row. And see how the stars are starting to form. Okay, let's do the last block. So now this block, this one went with the red to the left, this one's down, this one's to the left, and then this one's going to be down because you want to make sure your stars show up. Okay, like this. Pull it over a little bit so you can see it. Okay, so I'm ready to trim it like this. Move the camera, there we go. Okay, so now remember, this is going to be my corner again. I'm on the bottom corner of my quilt. Okay, so this side here and this side here are going to be trimmed through all 3 layers first. So let's do that first. And sometimes if I can't remember which one it is, I'll just take my, like a Frixion pen or a marking pen, and I'll just mark those sides to make sure that I don't flip it over by accident and forget what I'm doing, okay? So I just marked those, and I'm going to trim through all the layers. I do a lot of my trimming without the George trimmer, just because then I don't have to get my bigger rotary cutter out. The 60, and it does say that right in the instructions for this one. See how that lip is rather tall? You have to use the bigger rotary cutter for this ruler. You can see that I don't sometimes, and see how I've got black paint that's all off of the side of it here. That's where the rotary cutter hit it, because it wasn't tall enough. So that's why I like to use this method, because then I can just use a regular ruler. Okay, so I'm gonna trim through all the layers, because this is a corner block. Need a new rotary cutter blade. There we go. All right, and then this is the other one, so I'm just going to verify that I've got it correctly. So this is the one that I need to do here. And this is all in the instructions, starting on about page 32 with pictures. And I show it without the George trimmer, but I wanted to show that to you if you want to get it, because it is nice. I do like it, but I often just do them with just the regular ruler. Okay, so now we know this is my corner, and here's my corner. Now the rest of these we have to trim the other way, because we're going to remove the batting. So I'm going to do this with the regular ruler. Pull this back. Just going to finger press it back. And there are several pieces, as you can see. There's several pieces here, so you got to make sure you get all the pieces pulled back. All right. I'm going to lay the ruler on there. And I'm going to, whoops, this one doesn't want to crease very well, did it? Sometimes I just have to kind of flip it back. There it goes. Okay. So I'm going to lay this just slightly inside that folded edge, and I'm going to trim off the batting and the backing and the stabilizer like this. Okay, and this is how we did starting over's border blocks on the. This is how we did a lot of the cutting for that. So, but this whole body is done that way. Okay, so then I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and do this side, and then we'll trim the edges. So, okay, we'll do this one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pull it back and finger press it. And I went and looked on the Hoop Sisters site, and that trimmer is still up there under their tools. So, okay, so I've got it laid on there. I'm going to go just inside that folded edge. Okay. I'm going to trim off the backing, the batting, and the stabilizer, and then I've got just the top to trim here. Okay. So we're going to lay the 1/4 inch marking. I like to lay it just this side of the stitches, because that way it's a kind of a scant 1/4 inch seam. And then I'm going to trim off that top fabric to a 1/4 inch. Do it for this one. And yes, it does take a while to do the trimming, but I often just leave them kind of to the end, because I find that I do better keeping them, I don't make as many mistakes trimming as I do if I do them like a few at a time. And whatever works for you. If you have them numbered, it probably will work just fine. Okay, so here is, make sure we get these all on here. This is 13. Pull this back so you can see my whole row here. 13, this is 16, so that's over here. All right, and this is 14, and this is 15. So I had them numbered, okay, like that. And so now there's our last row, and this is the stars are forming there, okay. And now we have to trim, we have to sew them together to make a row. So what I like to do, whatever works for you. I like to work horizontally and make rows and then sew them together vertically, but some people like to do the vertical rows and sew them this way. So whichever works for you, I like to do it this way. So I've got my last row here, but the trimming for the inside body blocks starts on page 32 and runs through page 34. And I have pictures, and I do it with just the regular ruler in the pictures, okay? But just be careful that you look at your chart so that you get them trimmed the way they have to be done to put your borders on. And if you're not going to put borders on, you'd still trim it the same way. Like Judy just made hers the little wall hanging. So hers is done the same way, and that she's trimmed through the batting on the outside edges so that she could put her binding on, okay? But I am going to put borders on this one. All right, so are there questions about the trimming? Is this making sense to everybody? How you trim them? This is very much like starting over. It's just that the other one, starting over, we did a different method on the inside, and then the borders were done this way, and now we're kind of reversing it. This one's done this way on the inside, and the borders are done more like starting over was. So, okay? So now we're ready to start sewing. We're going to sew this last row together, and then we're going to sew the row together here, and then I'm going to show you how to put the strips on the back. So I do have a couple of strips on already. I did a couple of just to make sure I had my size right for my serpentine stitch. And this is usually what scares everybody, is that when we put these strips on the back, you're actually going to be sewing from the back. So be prepared. But you know what? You can't even see it on the front. So I'll try to show you where the stitching is. Okay. So I'm going to get my rotary rulers out of the way here because I'm going to need the iron here in a minute. And I'm also going to move my camera over here to the sewing machine. So we're going to sew these together now. So give me a second to move my camera over. This is always a trick trying to get it moved. I try not to roll over the cords and stuff. All right, we're just about there. I'm glad this has wheels though, because it does work better. Okay. All right, so now we're back to the sewing machine. Any other questions so far? Doing these blocks is really fun, and they do go pretty quick. And once you get going on the border blocks, they go really quick. So. And I am going to take the big quilt, the yellow and turquoise one. I'm going to take it into, flip this over the computer here so it won't dangle. I'm going to take it into the store on Tuesday and put it up in the store. So I haven't had it there for a long time, so I'm going to take it in because people like that quilt. It's real pretty. Okay. So now we have our blocks all trimmed. All right, so here's our blocks. This was 16, 15. See, I just marked them, and then when I hit that with the iron, they'll go away. There's 15, 14, and 13. Okay, so here's 13. So these two I'm going to sew together, and I'm going to match up my raw edges here and sew my row together. So I'm going to get some pins here. And when I sew this together, I don't use a 1/4 inch seam. If you do, you will see some of your like basting stitches. So I'll show you my little trick for putting these together. Got to get these lined up. And when you're trimming, take your time and be accurate with your trimming. Oh, you mean the this Lynn? The little decorative stitch? You mean when you're putting it together or when you're embroidering it? Excuse me, I have to sneeze. I've been working with batting all day. Ugh. Batting makes me sneeze. Okay. Yes. Oh, just the embroidery. Okay, so if it's not lining up for you, Lynn, that means that you're not pulling those. You're either pulling back too far on your fabrics and too tight and pulling it out of the hoop. You didn't. The other thing is you may not have your. You've got to have your no-show mesh very taut in the hoop. If it's a little loose in there, it's going to slide on you. So you really have to have it drum tight. That's one thing that I let people pull on is their no-show mesh for something like this. So that's important. And then don't pull back too hard, especially if your stabilizer's not tight. If you pull back too hard, you're going to pull it out of alignment, or you're not pulling hard enough. You might be just finger pressing it over and just being very loose with it, and then it's not in the right spot. So check your stabilizer first, because that does make a big difference. Okay, so I have cotton thread in my bobbin and in my needle, and I just chose kind of a neutral gray. My backing is gray, the front's not, but you don't really see the stitches at all, and so I just kind of picked something kind of neutral to the whole thing. Okay, yeah, the stabilizer is something, it really has to be tight, Lynn, and I know some, if you have a little trouble with your hands, you can't tighten your hoops as tight, but really pull on that stabilizer. So, because it should be taut when it's in an 8, I think you're doing the 8x8, so it should be pretty taut, but you do have to, work at it a little bit. So that really could be what it is. Okay. So when I sew these together, and I don't know that you can see real well, but can you see where that basting stitch is right there? I think you can kind of see the shadow of it, okay? That basting stitch is going to help us to not see that on the front. And my trick is I leave my needle in the center needle position, okay? I don't put it in the 1/4 inch needle position. I use it in the center, and I stitch. I look for that stitching line, and I stitch about 1.5 stitches on the inside of it, because that way I'm not going to see my basting stitches on the other side. If you do, you can fix it, and I'll show you, because I'm sure I'll see them. But that seems to work the best for me. So I am going to, I've got these all pinned together. I'm going to drop my needle, and I'm going, I can tell where that basting stitch is because I have that little mark on my foot too, and we've talked about that before. But I'm going to move this inward so that I'm about 1.5 stitches inside there, and I'm going to sew down. So I'm not doing a true 1/4 inch seam. I don't want to see that basting stitch in my quilt block. Now I have a feeling I'm going to have to do a little fixing, and it's easy to do. Oops, pick the cutter. And take my pins out, and we'll take a look at it. Okay, so when I do this, if you turn it out and you see white, then you know you missed a little bit. So see, I can see the white right here. And I look at the blocks to see which side of the block I'm seeing the white on. And in this case, it's on this side that I'm seeing the white. So I'm going to re-stitch that just a little bit further in side of where I stitched the first time, and see if I can cover up that little bit of white. And everything's still going to be fine. Everything's going to sew together fine. Okay? But that is a way. I don't use my Move It foot. You can if you want to. I don't think it doesn't. I don't normally need it for this, so I don't normally use it. These machines really feed well, so you can use your Move It foot if you want. I don't normally use it. Okay, so there now when I'm looking at this, and I don't know if you can see it, but I can't see, there was white right here, white stitches showing, and now I can't see it. And see, now that's nice and lined up. There's no white stitching showing, okay, on any of this. All right, so I'm good with that one. So now let's go on to the next one. We'll do the same thing. But yes, if you want to use your walking foot or your move it foot, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to turn this one. Remember to make sure we get it right side up so that our stars are right. I've never been a walking foot person. You know, I do use it for certain things, but I don't put it on for most stuff unless I know it, I'm going to have to. Okay, so let's get this one lined up. These machines really feed well, and I found that I don't need a walking foot for a lot of things. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. What is a move it foot? Jan, the move it foot is that great big electronic digital dual feed foot that came with your machine, that great big walking foot. That's the move it foot. That's what they call it, move it foot. It's the digital dual feed. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. There's that little line right there, and you can kind of see the edge of it. Okay, I'm going to stitch about a stitch or so on the inside of that. Now I'm just watching that line. I'm not really paying attention to the edge. I'm watching that line. Okay. Pull these pins out and let's see how we did on this one. Okay. Now see this one, I can see quite a bit of white. So there's white on this, right on this star right here. Okay. This one, the white's on this side. So I'm going to look at this, and I can see the white kind of on this side all the way down. So what I'm going to do then, I need to sew on that side. So I'm going to take this block, and I'm going to flip it over and sew on the opposite side that I sewed on, because I must not have had them quite lined up, see? So I'm going to sew on this other side instead and see if I can take care of that. And it's just going to be maybe another stitch inside of there, but that way I don't see that white on my block. And I've done a lot of these quilts, and if you just take your time, it is very easy to do this, but that's how you can get rid of some of those basting stitches, is just re-sew it. Okay, let's see how I did this time. Oh, that looks much better. So now I don't have all of those basting stitches in there. Okay, that looks much better. I just turned it over, and whatever side I'm seeing the stitches on, that's the side I sewed on. So in this case, it was the opposite side I did the first time. Okay, so let's do the last block. All right, so this one goes this direction. Make sure I got the sides right. I'm going to lay this one this way. Get them lined up. I've put a lot of these together over the years. Oh, Jan, what kind of machine do you have? This is the Luminaire. And Tammy, you have a Unity. Yours is a Unity, so you have that same foot. You have that. You have that digital dual feed, that big walking foot. That's it, you have it on your Unity. Okay. I didn't see your comment. Sometimes they don't come through, so I'm just inside that line. I'm just to the left of that line. Okay. See how we do. See how we did here. Ooh, that looks good. Got just a little teeny bit of white in here, but it's on the white, so I don't think I'm going to re-sew that one. I think it looks pretty good otherwise. So there's my row. Okay. Now, the next trick is going to be, I'm just going to move the camera a little bit so you can see over here, but I'm going to slide my cutting mat off of here. I'm going to pull my other mat over here because I'm going to do some ironing. And I want to show you I've shown you this iron before. Mitzi, I don't understand your question. You are stitching? I don't understand that question. Okay. So the next step is I want to open these seams up and open them flat because we need this quilt to be very flat. So I know you won't be able to see me too well, but my favorite iron to do this, and we've talked about this iron in the past, is my Eurosteam Evolution iron. And this has 50 pounds of pressure because it has that extra pressure. Everything is super flat. And when you're doing this type of quilt block, things need to be very flat when you go to do it. Otherwise, you've got lots of ripples. And I really love this iron. I went and looked. QVC has always had them, but they are out of them. But I did notice that you can buy them from Eurosteam on their website and also directly, and I found them on Amazon. So Amazon has them too. They are not a cheap iron, but you need a good steam iron to do these. Because you got to open these up and just use a really good steam iron. Okay, so I'm going to open this up, these little seams. I'm opening up my seams, and it takes me a little bit to do this, so I apologize. But I didn't want to have to move the camera again. Because you know what I'm doing. I'm flattening my seams out. But it does take me a while to do these because you have to open up all of these little sides. I remember these weren't like really solid pieces. They were like, pieces that were pieced in there. There was different pieces along the edges. So I'm going to have to turn it this way. The other thing that helps with this is if you get an awl. Helps sometimes with the tip to open up the seam a little bit. These are just very small seams, and it does make it a little harder to get them open. But if you take the time now to do it, your quilt will be very flat and it will look so much better. And I know it takes some time, but I've made a bunch of these, and I always take time to iron. Ironing is very important in any quilt. Okay, so I'm going to do all these seams. Like I said, I'm sorry that it takes me a little bit, but I have to do this to move on. It's a little hard when you got that small a seam in there to get them open, but once I get it started, I'm usually okay. And I love this iron. I've got 2 of them. My new reliable iron is really good too. It doesn't have quite as much pressure as this one does. That's why I got this one out today. I do like that iron also very much. But it doesn't have the pound of pressure that this one does. Okay. And of course, now most of my numbers are going to be gone because I touched them with heat, but it's okay. And I know that this is number 13 over here, so I'm going to try to keep that number on there so I remember which direction it goes on. All right. See if I can get this one done. This is the hardest part, is getting the seams open. Especially when I'm sitting down, so it makes it harder. I'm used to doing this at my cutting table. So it's a little harder when I'm sitting down at another table. But when there's only a 1/4 inch seam, it does take just a little bit to get them open. There we go. Okay. All right, so I got those opened. Yes, you can use a stick. What I use, the iron is it's a Eurosteam Evolution iron. Eurosteam is different than Eurosteam Evolution. So look up Eurosteam Evolution, Lisa. Eurosteam Evolution, and it's a steam. What it is. It's like a boiler iron. It has a boiler in it, and it has. That's why it has so much poundage of pressure. And the other thing that's cool is you can touch that iron to like a balloon or something like that, and it will not pop it, but it's still hot. So it's really cool because it's a very unusual type of iron. But it's the Eurosteam Evolution iron. Okay, so here are my seams now. I have them nice and open, but we're not quite done yet. I'm going to take my little pair of scissors and I'm going to trim those down to about 1/8 of an inch. Because when I go to put my little strips on, I wanted my strips smaller so they wouldn't stick out into my quilt so much, and so I needed these to be a little smaller. So after I get them opened up, I can just slide my scissor right underneath there and just trim those off to about 1/8 of an inch, like that. And neatens it up, and when I go to put the little strips on, then I won't have to worry about the strips, not covering everything. So I'm just going to trim those off. And just put your scissor underneath there and just trim. It works real slick. And I normally do these a strip at a time. You can do it all at the end if you want, but it's harder because then you've got the junction. So I usually do it a strip at a time. I iron and then I trim. But that way you don't have to worry about it. Like this, the reason I figured out how to I did this is that when I went to do my strips for this, my strips were not covering perfectly, and then I had to trim. And I figured, look, we might as well just trim and have it over with to begin with. Okay, so now I've got my trim done. Okay, those are all ironed and trimmed. Okay. I am going to just quickly press this on the right side as well. To give it a little extra burst here. Okay, oops. Oh, so there is my final row for this. And then, once you do your rows, we're going to just put the row on. So I have to remember which side is which here. Okay, this is 16. This must be 13 over here. Make sure I get it right side up. And I can feel that my sides that I trimmed are along the bottom here. So this is the top, okay, of the row, like this. So I'm just going to do the same thing, but now we're just putting this row on instead of on just one block. I have to get my top here. There we go. All right. Now, the trick with this is going to be you want all of these junctions to be as perfect as possible, okay? So this takes a little time. You have to take a little time and do some pinning, okay? So I always like to, now with these, what I do is I like to pin right in the junction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for where my junctions are, where the blocks are. And I've got open seams, and I'm going to try to put a pin right down through the seam that holds that seam together, okay? Like that. I've got the pin right in the seam to hold it as close as I can. And yes, I have had to take off a row. It happens. In fact, I had to do it today. One of my rows refused to line up, and this one's being kind of contrary, so let's try this one again. So I haven't put one of these together for a while, so every now and then, you'll have a contrary row. It just doesn't want to line up. Okay. So I like to try to get the pin right into the seam if I can, because it keeps it as straight as possible. Now these little pins are real soft, so they bend real easy, so I throw a lot of pins away when I'm making these types of quilts. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing. See, I'm lining up those squares there, trying to get my seams really lined up. And I put the pin right in the seam. And do the same thing down here. I had one of these blocks that I kind of trimmed out the... I know, I love these pins. They do bend really easy when you're doing stuff like this, but I don't like to drive over any of the other pins. And I will drive over these. Okay, so I'm going to try to get this lined up. I'm working at this one right here. And the star ones are a little tricky because there's a bunch of little junctions there. So just take your time. Okay, let's see if I can get that pin. There we go. Okay, and then I think I'm going to put a pin here. You get to watch me pin tonight. I do love these pins though. Yeah, these are those magic pins, and they're patchwork pins. When I first started, sewing, I used those big heavy quilter's pins with the yellow tops, and they caused all kinds of havoc on the sewing machine. So you really need to use thin pins if you're going to drive over a pin. I mean, and I do when I'm quilting, so I probably shouldn't, but I do. Okay, now I didn't take my embroidery unit off, so my embroidery unit's a little bit in the way here, but it'll be fine. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing and sew this row on. I'm going to sew just to the left of that seam, that basting line. Okay, and I like to tie off for sure on the rows because that way I know nothing's going to come apart when I go to put the borders on. And I'm just inside that line. Second here, should have taken my embroidery unit off, but I didn't. Okay, so when you get to these junctions, it's a little bit thick. Don't be afraid to go over them though. I just have a number 11 needle in my machine, so I hardly ever put a heavier needle in. Second here, I'm going down in a little hole back there. When I do small stuff like this, I usually don't take my embroidery unit off because it's a nuisance. You have to take it off, so I don't usually take it off. Alright, so I think I'm going to have to do a little resewing because I'm not sure if I caught that over that junction, so we'll look and see what it looks like here. Alright, we're going to tie off on the other side. But the pins, if there's some of the new people here, if you don't have the pins, they are on the website. They're under the accessories, miscellaneous accessories, and they're magic pins. But I do love these, and they're also heat resistant, so that they don't, like if you touch the tips, they don't melt, which is nice. Okay, well let's take a look here and see how we did. Okay, so I've got quite a white spot showing right here, so I didn't do very well there. The rest of that looks pretty good. And then I've got a little spot over here. So I am going to flip this over, and where I'm seeing the white is right here. So I didn't have this one quite lined up well. So I'm going to flip this over. It's on the upper part. So I'm going to flip this over this way and sew on that side on this star. Because I must not have had it quite lined up right. And you can see all the stitching. And I don't want to see that stitching. I must have just had it pulled down just a little bit. So I think I got it this time. Alright. Let's see how we did. Oh, that looks much better. Okay. I think that looks better. Got a little piece of thread sticking out, but we can cut that off. Alright. I think that looks pretty good. Still got a little spot in the center, but it's white on the white, so I don't really notice it. And then this one, I do need to go back. This one over here, I knew I kind of missed a little bit, so I'm going to go and catch that because I kind of swerved up here a little bit when I got to that where the pin was. So we'll try this one again. And it's often where I have to fix a little bit is where the stars meet because they are a little thicker. in the center, and so sometimes it's a little hard to get them to line up just right. Let's see if that one looks better now. All right. Oh yeah, that looks better. See, this one looks good right here. We want that one to look nice too. And I still got a little spot right here, but it's not too bad. I think I'll just leave that one. I think it'll be okay. All right. So now I'll just tip the camera up here again. And I'm gonna go back here, and I need to iron the long seam open. Now this takes me a minute, so I apologize. It will take me a minute to do this, but we can't go on until we do. Yeah, people were talking about a stick or something. I use an awl also, and I forgot to get it out. It's in the other room, and I just simply forgot to get it out. But that works pretty well when you're trying to open these seams up, because it just gives you a little bit of a tool to keep your fingers out of there. But this is the part that takes a little time, getting the ironing done. And it did on the starting over. Starting over, that was the part that took me the longest, was ironing, actually. I mean, I think, but if you don't take the time to iron, your quilt's not going to turn out near as good. Ironing is very important. I don't like to iron either. But I have an iron, I think, running every single day. When I get home, I think the iron goes on as soon as I get home, basically, because I know I'm going to be out here working. Okay, almost got that side. Got a couple more blocks to do here. This has got a lot of pressure, so it does work very well for these seams. Makes them nice and flat. Making sure there's no more questions while you're watching me iron here. We're almost done with the ironing, so we won't have to. I'll show you how to put the strips on next. The strips are really fun, actually. I like putting the strips on. It's my favorite part of this. This is so much faster than the other stripping method that we did on starting over with the sashing. We're going to do a little bit of this on this quilt as well, but this is a lot faster putting it together. It's just the ironing that takes a little time. So I'm getting over that star area. It's always a little harder. Just about done. Got the last one to do here. Kind of got my back turned to the camera, so I'm trying to make sure there's no comments. So, all right. Ironing. Whoops, just about done. And then we'll trim this seam too. Now you want to put your whole center of your quilt together before you start your strips. I did do a couple just because I wanted to make sure that my setting was correct on my machine. So I did do a couple of strips earlier. But I normally do all the strips at the same time, and then we'll talk about the strips here in a minute and how to make them. All right, that looks better. Looks pretty good. Then after we trim these, then I will just press it on the front again. Okay. Put this back down, then we'll trim these again. Just like we did the other one. I'm just going to take my scissors and trim it to about 1/8 of an inch. Just kind of slide the tip of your scissors under there, and it works pretty slick. I thought about trying to do a different way and not have as much seam allowance, but you really can't get a good flat quilt unless you've got a little bit to open up. And I did as little as I thought I could possibly do, which is about 1/4 of an inch. So I've done these that are that you use a 1/2 inch seam, and then you have a really big strip on the back. And I don't care for the big strips. because it really shows a lot more. These strips really do not show much. When you turn it over, you can hardly see where the strips are. But it takes there's a little bit of getting ready to put them on. I'm using those same applique scissors. Gosh, I wish I could still get these because I need a new pair because mine are dull. I need to see if somebody will sharpen them for me. But they do work really well for this kind of stuff because you're not catching you're not catching the underneath fabric. It's dull on the tip here, so I like that. So we'll do this side. And it just slides right under there. I'm basically just cutting off the fabric, and you're leaving, what little teeny bit of batting is in there. And then your strips are going to cover easier. All right. Getting down to the end here. Oops. I always have little pieces all over, and I usually use my tape roller to get rid of some of these little pieces. Okay. Get that off of the side there. All right, so we're trimmed. All right. So after we get those seams trimmed, I remember when we first started doing these quilts years ago, I thought, how the heck do you put these together with batting in there and then you don't see it on the back? Because you don't want to see that ugly stuff on the back. Well, you put bias tape on the back. And there's a lot of different ways to make bias tape. So I tell you in the instructions, if you're doing the whole quilt, I'm going to look here. I can't remember how many I told you to cut. 50 if you're doing the whole quilt. I only cut like 5 or 6 because I was just doing a small quilt. Okay, but what I like to do, and I did this, I learned to do this later. I like to sew them end to end. Okay, I like to sew it all into one big piece, and then I just have a piece and I can trim it where I need to, instead of having to try to piece as I go. So I just sew the whole thing end to end and make one great big long 1-inch strip. And then we need 1/2-inch bias tape. So you can see this is ironed in. Okay, so bias tape can be made several ways. They have these little bias tape makers like this. These are the ones you use with an iron. Next, yes, that is it, Lisa. Search on Amazon for Eurosteam Evolution, brings up Evolution Next Generation. That is it. Yep. That is the newest model. That's the one I'm using tonight. I have two. I have an old one. I have an older one that is different, but the one you found on Amazon is the one. I found it today. Okay? So this is not the right size. I don't have the right size here, but you need a 1/2-inch bias tape maker. Okay? You use this by pushing that 1-inch strip in here, and then it will fold it over 2 times like this, and then you just use an iron and go along with the iron, and it makes bias tape. All right? That is the easiest way to make bias tape. The very easiest way I discovered years ago was this wonderful little machine. I'm going to show it to you. You might still be able to find some. They are no longer made. I love this thing. I've got 3 of them, so that if one dies, I've got 2 more to replace it. This is a bias tape maker. It's electric. Here's my little bias tape maker here. And you can get these manual ones that you can just use your iron. But what this does is this little thing has an iron on it, and it runs through this tip, and it has a little motor, and you just keep going. And it's so great, because you know how many of these I've made that I've had to put all this bias tape on. This is the most wonderful little tool. And you still can find them. There's Simplicity bias tape makers. You can still find them and the tips, but they're very expensive online because they've been not made for some time, and it's hard to find them. So I would recommend. That's how I made mine today. But you can still get bias tape makers. and they make them in all different sizes, and it is much faster if you have something like this than to sit there and fold this in manually and go all the way down, like if you have to do 50 strips, okay? So go get yourself a bias tape maker, and so you can get all that bias tape made. So, okay, so that's what I've done, is I've got my bias tape made. So it is folded. This is like single fold bias tape. So the two raw edges are folded into the center, okay, like that, and that's ½ inch. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to change to, I like to use for the bias tape, I like to use monofilament thread, which is the clear stuff. Really the only monofilament that I've ever used that really works really well is Mettler Transfill. It is also on the website. I've been using it for a long time, and it sews really well, and it works well on the bobbin. There are a lot of monofilaments out there that do not work well, and they don't run through the machines too well. So I tell you, order some of this Transfill. And this is the clear. They make a smoke, so if you're doing a real dark quilt, get the smoke color, because then you won't see it. Like if you're doing a black or navy blue, get that smoke color, and it won't show as much. But this is the clear, because mine's fairly light colored. Okay, and I'm going to, whoops, I always have trouble with monofilament. Getting it threaded for some reason. I don't know why. There we go. I'm going to thread this. And I use this for the strips, because I don't want anybody to see my strips. Let's see if it threaded it. Now, my machine does not like monofilament too well. It never has threaded it, and it's very difficult to thread. Some days it threads it, some days it doesn't. So I'll put my glasses on and I'll hand thread the needle. Some days it does, some days it doesn't. It just depends on its mood, I guess. Okay. Put that under there so I won't lose the end. Now, the trick with these is you want to always, whoops, get my bobbin back in there. You want to do all these strips the same direction first and then go the other direction, because that way all the junctions here in the centers are going the same way. So what I did here is, this was row 4 that we just did. I am going to press this real quick before I put the strip on so that it's a little flatter, because I can feel it's just a little wavy under me. I like to press it once from the top so that that seam's nice and flat before I put the strips on. Okay, but if you want something flat, that iron is the best. Okay. So I've started with the strips up here. You can see I have a couple of strips on, like this. So I'm going to do this one next. So this is the next one I'm going to do, because I want all of those on first, and then I'll turn it and do the strips going the other way. And in the instructions, the way I always used to do these was with the water-soluble Dritz. It's made by Dritz now. It used to be Collins wash-away wonder tape. However, I found, I remember one of the last ones of these I made, I didn't have any. I was out of this, and I didn't have any, and I needed to get the quilt done. So what I ended up using was fabric glue stick, and honestly, it worked, I think, better. So these types of strips, the bias tape on the back, I don't put on with the Collins tape anymore. We will use that next week when we put the borders on, because this works real well for that other sashing method that we did with starting over. So we're going to use the tape. We're just going to use the glue for this one. I got to find an end here. Oops. So I'm going to take my bias tape. Here's my bias tape. Here's the raw edges in here. Those are going to go down so you don't see the raw edges. And I'm just going to take my Dritz glue stick, and I'm just going to put a row of glue right on top of that seam allowance on the back. And I'm going to stick my bias tape right down to that. And this works quite well. I'm going to have to do a little trimming. I got some little hairs sticking out. I'm just going to do a little bit more. We'll just do this next block here. Just take the glue stick. But I learned this by accident. I just didn't have any tape one time, and I needed to do the quilt, and I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? I thought, well, I wonder if the glue stick would work, and it did work quite well, so I just do them with the glue stick now. Saves a lot. That tape's a little on the expensive side, so some of the stuff I have to use it for, but it works great for this works great, so okay. I'm going to keep putting it down. And if you kind of go right along the middle of the seam, everything will be nice and straight for you. And you know what? If it's not perfectly straight on the front, you'll never see. Because we're going to use the magic stitch to put these on with. The little serpentine stitch hides a lot of things. It hides a lot of things. And if it's not perfectly straight, no one is ever going to know because the stitch is not straight. Okay, so then I'm just going to, whoops, where'd my scissors go? There we go. I'm going to trim this off. I like to leave a little end, so I'll trim those off later, but that way if things scoot a little bit. I think that would be fine, Lynn, also, but you have to iron it. So if you don't want to have to iron it, the Steam Machine 2 strips would work too, but you have to iron. You'd have to iron it first and then iron it a second time. But that's why I just use the glue. It seems to, then I don't have to iron. One less time to iron. I have to iron enough as it is. So, okay. All right. So we got this on. I've got it smoothed out, and I'm going to go to my. I think it's on tab number 2 on my machine, and it's my little serpentine. So mine's 219. And I wrote it in my book. I don't think I wrote it in the instructions, but I did write it in my book, what setting I always use. And I'm going to find it so I don't forget. Here it is. My serpentine is the width of 5. So the width is 5. I think that's the default setting for this one, yep. And then the length is 1.4. So I just made it a little longer so that it wasn't so close together. So I made it 5 millimeters wide and 1.4 millimeters long. Okay? Get the strip out of my lap here so I won't tie my leg up in it. Okay. So now we're going to put the strip on. Now I like to try to start the strips from the same side each time, if I can. I don't remember which side I went this time, so we're just going to take a guess and go with this side. Okay? And the trick with these strips is you're going to sew down one side, and as everybody can see, we're sewing from the back, aren't we? And it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. What we want to do is the zig, you know, the little stitch goes like this. We want this side, you know, on the right, to just barely go off the strip. So most of the stitching is going to be on the strip, and it's just going to just go off the strip on the outside edge. Okay? So when I look at this, I'm going to, those 2 marks that are on that foot, we've talked about this before, I need to kind of line it up with the edge of the strip being on the inside notch, this notch that's over to the right here. And when you start sewing, if you're a little off, you can adjust. Okay, so I'm going to start my serpentine, and I want the right-hand side of the little right-hand arm of the serpentine to go just off the strip. So most of my stitching is on the strip. And I'm just going to go down both sides of the strip. So I'm going over that junction. It's a little bit bigger, but it still works just fine. And it just goes off the edge of my strip. And you know what? If it's a little off, when you turn this over, you're not really going to be able to see this at all. I remember when I first did this quilt and I hung it up in the store, people thought I had pieced it. and then quilted it. And they said, well, how did you put it together if you did it in the embroidery machine? And I had to turn it over for them to see the strips, for them to believe that they were there, because the little serpentine just kind of disappears right into the stippling and decorative stitching. So I'm just going down. I have to do a little bit of trimming on the back. I've got a few little hairs sticking out, but we can fix that. Okay, there we go. I'm going to cut that off. Now I'm going to go down the other side. I'm going to line it up. Oops. Now this one, this inside shoulder is kind of be on the edge of the strip, and that's how I know it's going to be about in the right position. So I kind of have to get it started, and once you get started sewing, you can see if you're a little off or not. I'm just a little off. I have to go roll in this a little bit. I'm going to put this strip on. Okay. You're mostly sewing on the strip. You just want it just to go off the left. This is just going off the left. But if you don't stay mostly on the strip, if you go off the strip too much, it will leave gaps, and then your strip's going to kind of gap open. So you want that to be closed so you don't take any chance of seeing any raw seam in it. And by starting, as you noticed on the same side, the little serpentine, the little shoulders are going out. Stay fairly well lined up if you start kind of on the same side each time. And even if they don't, you really don't see it. I'm going to try to make it so you can see it, but it's real hard with that monofilament thread. Okay, all the way across. What kind of thread am I using, sir? Oh, this is the Metler Transfill, which is a monofilament thread, Teresa. I have it at the store. It's also on the website. Yes, so I do have it. And you can get it in the clear and the smoke. And I don't have any smoke, I don't think, in stock right now, but I can order some if somebody needs it. I usually use clear for most everything except for like black, and then sometimes navy. I need the smoke. It just depends on how dark it is. All right, so there's my strip. I'll hold it a little closer so you can see the little serpentines. But when you can see the serpentines on this side, but when I turn it to this side, I'm going to try to get close up here. I don't know. You can kind of see, what you can see more than anything is you can see the outline of the stitches. And when you look at it, especially when it's on the wall away from it, you don't even see that. I mostly just see kind of a depression, I guess is a good thing, or a word for it. It's like the little depression where the stitches go. But they kind of just blend in with the stippling. Okay. All right, so that side's done. So now we're going to do the other side. I'll do another strip for you. So this time, now that we've got all of them going this direction, now we're going to start going this way. So we're going to do the same thing. And when you have a big quilt, yeah, the strips are long. That's why I like to sew all of these together so that I don't have to sew as I'm going. I like them all sewn together already. Okay? Okay, let me find the end here, and I'm just going to use my glue. Turn the camera a little bit. So what do you think of the new camera? Does it look good on your end? Looks good on my end. Okay, so we're going to glue this down. And that's why you want to have all the strips done one direction and then do the other direction so that they all are laying the same way. All right, so that side's done. Let's do this side. And you just keep going until you get all of your strips covered up, or all the raw edges covered up with your strips. And it's amazing how nice and you don't have to use like matching strips like mine. you don't have to use matching strips to your back. You can have them be contrasting if you want to. I just happen to match mine, so whatever you want to do. This I just used this. This is the fabric I had, and I was just using some stuff I had at home here to do this. So, okay, so we're gonna get this and see. Here's one of the seams right here where I did the strips all together. Okay, so got some threads here. Sometimes I have to go back and do a little trimming when I'm all done with the strips, but okay. Get this one. Whoop, come back, Cap. Where'd it go? Now it's on the floor, of course. I'll find it. Put the glue over here so I won't glue myself to it. Okay. Get that pushed down, and then we'll trim this off a little bit. Like I said, I like to leave a little end, and I'll trim this off later. Yes, I do, Diane. I use, just like I'm sewing binding together. Diane asked if I sewed my strips together with a 90-degree angle. Yes, I do. Just like I'm doing binding, but it's only 1-inch strips instead of 2.5 or 2 1/4 inch strips. Yes, you could, Deb. I have a tendency to like to start on the same side each time because it keeps the little ridges kind of even. That's why I do it from the same side each time, but you can. If you have trouble sewing on the left side, just turn it over and do it from the other side. Because really the little bumps don't, if they're not matching up, they really don't show much. So, okay, so we're going to do this one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get all lined up here. Again, I just want the little bump to go just barely off the edge of the strip. I usually take about a stitch or two off the edge of the strip. And this little serpentine goes along pretty quick, so you can I kind of floor it sometimes. I won't tonight, but when I'm doing these, I have a tendency to sew kind of fast, because you can get them done pretty fast that way. Now, I think when I did my first Hoop Sisters quilt, they used 3/4 inch bias tape, and you could really see the strips. They were much wider, but you didn't have to trim your seam allowances down, and the trimming doesn't take that much time, and I like the thinner strips. I did it mostly for this quilt because I wanted the stars. I didn't want those little strips to be quite as noticeable in the stars. So that's why I cut that size down a little bit, just to keep the strips from showing so much. All right, here we are on that end. Now, what Deb was asking if she has trouble sewing on, the second here. Didn't cut. There we go. She has a little trouble sewing on this side, so she could turn it around and sew down the same side again, and that's fine. I'm going to sew down from the same side again, but it does keep things lined up a little bit better if you can do it from the same side each time. Just whatever works for you. All right, let's sit here. Got to get a hold of it again. And then you'll also notice as you work on these that it gets flatter and flatter and flatter, especially if you've ironed well to begin with. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit here. I like to sew fast. All right. Couple more to do. I won't do all of them tonight. I'll finish it up before we end, or before I finish up for the night. I'll finish these and post a picture so you can see it. I don't think you need to watch me do it again. So hopefully I didn't break a thread. The monofilament is a little bit tricky to work with. It runs through the machine pretty well, but I do get a little bit of thread breakage with it. And when you fill your bobbin with it, do not fill it at full speed. Turn the speed down for your bobbin winder, and also do not fill it full. Fill it about a quarter. Okay. Could you use the same thread you quilted it with? Yes, you could, Tammy. I have done that in the past. I personally think that the monofilament shows less, though, because you will see the quilting thread more. Like this quilting thread is white, just white embroidery thread, and it would show more than this monofilament does. So it's up to you. If you want it to show, I have done it with it showing, and it looks fine. I want it to look, blend into my quilting. So yes. Oh, they're just cut they're not cut on the bias. The strips are not cut on the bias. They're just straight. I cut them with my 1-inch strip cutter with my Sizzix machine. And no, they're not cut on the bias. They're just cut straight. Okay, so there's another strip. So then we'll do another one. I've got 2 more to do. You want me to do another one, or you want me to? Are you got the strips down? You want me to do another one? I will. I kind of like doing them. They don't take very long. Once you get going, it's kind of neat to watch. All of a sudden, everything just is totally neat on the back. Isn't that cool? How it's turned neat? It's getting so neat looking on the back now. Once you start putting the strips on, it's just amazing. Especially the big quilt. It was just amazing how fast it looks so neat. And it just got so good to go. You're good to go. Okay, so I'm gonna glue another one on. You guys good to go? You need me to do another one for you? I'll glue one on since I've got the glue going here. All right, are there other questions? So this is how you finish the center. And you want to have and then what we'll do next time is we will trim the border blocks, which are trimmed differently, and then we will assemble the border to the body of the quilt. And that'll be next week. Now, I think most of you have seen the new classes that I put up for June, so make sure you take a look at those. You're good? Everybody's good? All right, good. So I'll go ahead and just finish the glue here, so I've got it all glued on, and then I will finish these after class and put my last couple on. I've just got 2 left to put on, and then I will be done with the back. But it looks so neat. Isn't it cool how it just really neatens it up? It's amazing. And then the front is so clean looking. And you would never guess that there was raw seams on the back. So, okay. So that is the body of the Hunter's Star. A second here, let me turn the camera around here so I can say goodbye to everybody. Anybody have any other questions? There was lots of good questions tonight, everybody, so it's always good to ask questions. If you need more information about the iron or any of that kind of stuff, you can always personal message me too. So, but yeah, that iron's pretty awesome. I wish that QVC had been having them, but they must be out. So it does, doesn't it? It's amazing. You put those strips on, and then all of a sudden the whole thing just finishes. So it is really cool. And then we'll be doing that on the back of the border blocks as well. The border blocks have those same little strips on them, and then we have to strip the borders to the quilt with a different type of sashing, the one like starting overhead. So it'll be just a little bit different, but we'll do that next week then. So, okay. So everybody, I'm so glad that you came and joined me tonight, and I'm so anxious to see everybody's starting overs or Hunter Stars, because I've been seeing people working on them, and I'm anxious to see all your colors and everything. It's amazing, the same pattern, you can do it a million different ways, and every one will look different. So it's so cool. So post your progress so far on the group. I'd love to see them. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening, and we will be seeing you next week. Thank you. Good night.